Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com.
You just try to spell it out for Siri just so she can really understand what you're saying?
I've been told that I do not enunciate enough and I need to speak more clearly.
If you need to speak more clearly, I'm done. I need to go home. I need to pack up.
What?
Because exactly.
I can't understand
right?
you. What are you saying?
Exactly. I talk in a garbled mess.
Garbled mess. Also name of my sex tape. Tom is away this week. He's a little sick boy, so he can't make it today. But
I mean, he said that his voice sounded like a Barry White soundtrack. And I was like, that
honestly sounds great.
Do you want bring it in? Yeah. Like, let's rip it out. But
rip it out. You rip it out, and I'll whip it out.
Yeah.
It's a news and politics podcast, if that's not immediately apparent. And it's amazing that we're coming to you, streaming to you live this week, because just about every IT system in the world was suffering from a major outage this week, thanks to CrowdStrike. Adam, why don't you tell us who CrowdStrike is and what they do?
CrowdStrike. You may not have heard CrowdStrike, but they're basically a security service provider for computers. So think of the standard person's going to think of like antivirus software, right? Mm-hmm. So that's effectively what they're doing, but on a much more complex and detailed scale. They're used mainly by businesses to particularly CrowdStrike Endpoint, which is basically a software package that's installed on the background of your devices, runs in the background. You don't even know it's there, but it's doing all the things that your antivirus would normally do, but it's reporting it back to sort of the central, I guess, nervous system of a company, so they can really have good visualization of what their entire network is doing. It is CrowdStrike. Falcon is one of the leading security software services that are out there. That, as well as I think Windows Endpoint Defender, like they're the big two. They're the ones that get the best updates. They're the ones that have got the best functionality and best optimization and all this other kind of stuff, right?
It is a company that undergirds a very serious portion of the internet that we the business tech environments. It's
not half, maybe 30 or 40%.
A substantial portion of all of the things that are happening in the world work with CrowdStrike. So
and you think, great, they're a trusted partner. They've obviously got lots of resources. What could go wrong?
What we're going to do is we're going to put all of our eggs in one basket, and what could go wrong?
Nothing's ever happened like this before.
I think
why would it happen now?
The more eggs you have in one basket, the better. That's what I understand. You want as many eggs in the one basket as possible, so you don't have to go back and get more baskets.
That's it. Yeah, exactly right. So what happened was they pushed an update through. So log off. I think it was the update was pushed at sort of midnight US time on sort of what would have been there Friday or Thursday, one of the two. And obviously the devs obviously packaged it up, they've rolled it out, and that then created a logic error, which meant that every single Windows machine, if you had CrowdStrike Endpoint installed on it, got into a rolling blue screen of death. The blue screen of death, the dreaded blue screen of death, is, of course, where basically you get a blue screen that pops up and says your computer's had an error and it has to restart. And your computer restarts, and then the same thing happens forever. That doesn't stop until
what's called a boot loop, where it's just like you try and boot up the computer, it doesn't work, it shuts down, and then tries to boot up again, doesn't work, shuts down. That's what happened to a good amount of the business infrastructure of the world on Friday. So if you're trying to catch a flight or you're trying to go do the self-checkout at Coles, or trying to see your bank balance on NAB, there's a bunch of things that you just could not do because CrowdStrike had basically pushed this
Nerfed
era.
everything.
Yeah, just basically just destroyed the world. So here's me working on my little.
It wasn't just your laptop. It was like servers as well.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
well, this
like
is the important part.
Back end servers that are running cloud software, such as Azure,
Mm.
they also have the agent or the endpoint software installed on them, and so therefore, once all the cloud softwares start to go down, all the services that rely on that cloud software go down.
Yeah.
And same thing for other SaaS software as a service platforms.
Mm-hmm.
That service might go down, which might be an integral part of the business for this company.
Mm-hmm.
And then so that means that business can't do trade. It's just a cascading set of effects that basically shut down the global economy for about 5 hours, which may not sound like long.
Yeah.
But it's like hundreds and hundreds, probably like almost billions of dollars worth of damage.
I'd say, yeah, for sure, billions. Like you think about just the flights, the flight infrastructure. All these photos coming out of people at Sydney Airport, just unable to, sort of get on flights. The boards that was telling people, where to go, like the technology involved in like getting the planes to fly. I guess I don't know. That might have been affected. Like you just think about it from just that one industry and that one perspective. Like so much of everything is tied into cloud computing. So if you have an issue, if you're running Microsoft, right? If you're a Microsoft shop, you got Microsoft Word on your computer, you're running Microsoft software on the device, you're using SharePoint, you're using Teams. If something happens with, Microsoft's cloud servers, you may as well just like pack up and go home. Like you can't work. It's not like the old days where you go, oh, well, the Dropbox is out, but, it's fine because I've got a local copy of this thing stored on my computer and I can just work off that. Like because of all these cascading failures, like whole areas of the economy cease to function. And I really because I've sold cloud software for a very large part of my career. And I think I really did believe in the utility of it. And I'm starting to question that now.
Well, it's cloud. When we say cloud software, let's be clear. It's a software package that is rolled out on the individual devices. So the
CrowdStrike is, yeah. So we're talking about two different things here. So CrowdStrike is a piece of software that is installed on devices. The larger problem, I think, is the fact that so many services that we have are based on cloud-based technology, which is fine because the way we always sold cloud services when I was working at these various tech companies was you've got all these redundancies, right? You've got multiple servers in region, so your data is stored in 3 different locations. If one server goes down, you've got 2 different redundancies. You've got 99.99% uptime. Like it's way more secure and much better than you just having a server in your back room, which is prone to failure and all the time. You need to have expensive maintenance on it and all that sort of stuff. Much better to just put it on a multi-tenanted server. We all put all of our stuff on all of these 3 servers, and then you've got dedicated people and hardware and updates and security. All that stuff goes through them. Now that is advantageous, unless of course something happens to those servers because it becomes a single point of failure for the whole economy. And because all of these cloud services are working in conjunction with other cloud services operating via API, right? Application Program Interface code that essentially says like, so, okay, for example, you're working at Coles. You've got the self-checkouts, okay? So they're operating off one set of like cloud services. You've got the Flybys program, which connects to a different set of cloud services, which is also speaking to the terminal. You've got prices and promotions, which might be speaking to a different area. You've got there are a bunch of different services that go into any one service operating in a timely manner at the point of sale. And this is this is for flights, this is for everything. So the problem is when you've got one area of the cloud that isn't working, like you say, it's a cascading set of failures, because if any of those businesses don't work, if all of a sudden the promotions engine, your Flybys or your whatever, your points doesn't work,
crashes the point of sale
terminal. It could crash the point of sale. So each one of these, what it shows me is that it's a single, cloud is a single point of failure for the entire economy. It used to be the case if Woolies servers went down, you go, okay, well, I can't shop at Woolies right now, or I have to pay in cash, or I'll go to Coles down the street. But if Coles and Woolies and your bank and everything is all on cloud servers and the servers are down, like it presents like an almost existential threat to the economy. Like it's kind of like
it's Skynet like blowing everything up, right? Like
it's exactly like that film. What's that Julia Roberts film, The Leave the World Behind, where it was just like some kind of like societal collapse.
Yeah.
Based on.
And when we talk about cloud computing, the majority of cloud servers seem to be either Amazon, so AWS,
Amazon Web Services,
or Azure, like Microsoft.
Microsoft,
Telstra's got some. There's other providers.
Google Cloud's also a growing player in the space as well. Yeah.
But like that's not. I mean that's one risk point in terms of what actually happened on the weekend, like on Friday. Sorry. The issue is more to do with, it's the same issue but with security software. So I guess the root cause is we've got two big players in the, like, if you're a big business, you need to have one of these two.
Yeah, if you're Oracle, like if you're one of these like massive type of company, if you're Boeing, if you're like a massive, if you're Woolworths,
you need to have one of these two services.
Yeah, one or the other, really.
And there are other options. To be clear, there are other ones, but they're just not as good. So, the issue being is, the question is, how do you, and it's the same question for the Australian supermarket sector, and I guess as we discussed with cloud computing, how do you remove a duopoly from a system which has become sort of entrenched?
It doesn't feel so nice, does it, Coles? Doesn't feel so nice when you're the victim of a duopoly, does it, mate? How does it feel?
And like, again, the actual error here, like the main problem was because it was on everyone's local computer that got blue screened, even trying to fix the issue became an issue. An hour and a half.
There are IT teams that are going to have to roll out fixes manually to devices. So you might have, I don't know, like say your Hertz Rent-A-Car, and you've got like hundreds, thousands of locations all with their own computers, like all in different places. Someone's going to have to go from IT to like go to each one of these locations and like manually fix or like roll back. It's not just a thing where you can update it over the air. Like, some of those things can, but a lot of them can't, especially if you're running like older hardware environments. If you're running some old,
in this instance, so if you hadn't turned your computer on in the last, I don't know, 24 to 48 hours, you'll be fine. You'll turn your computer back on, CrowdStrike. If you've got CrowdStrike, this is. If you haven't got CrowdStrike, you're fine. Don't worry about it. If you do have CrowdStrike installed, if you turn your computer back on, it'll auto-update and that'll fix the issue.
Right.
If you are currently one of the computers that has a blue screen of death that will not stop, someone has to come in, put
and Windows
into safe mode, which safe mode's like a, if you know what safe mode is, you've been living under a rock for the last 40 years, but safe mode's like a base level.
It's a restricted environment.
But it's also like, it removes all the bells and whistles of the normal Windows operating system. But anyway, you have to go into safe mode and basically manually delete a file and then trigger an update and it'll sort itself out. The problem is, this is the other thing that complicates it. If you've got an encrypted hard drive, say with BitLocker, you need an admin password to be able to access safe mode, because this is some ways people get around encryption, is that you can go into safe mode and get around the encryption. But basically, because a lot of the advice is, well, you got to encrypt your hard drive. So if someone takes your physical hard drive, they can't read you don't want them reading the information. So that means that everyone's got encryption going, which means you need an admin password to be able to release the encryption, to be able. So basically, so you could call someone. Like, some people will be able to call people and guide them through it, but some people are actually going to have to go in probably and manually type the password in, because you can't be sharing passwords, because that's not very good.
Right. Oh my God. This is being labeled as, because of the failure of CrowdStrike and the attendant effects that it's had on cloud infrastructure and all of these individual computers across the world, it's been called the biggest like cybersecurity event.
It's Y2K 24 years late.
This is what people were worried about with Y2K. Like, obviously we didn't have planes falling out of the sky or anything like that, but it's like, it's pretty close. Like, basically, so like a meteorite hit the IT infrastructure of the world, and we've had to, spend the last 96 hours trying to, sort of fix it, which is just crazy. Like
it was an
here's
insane
me
day on Friday.
Sitting at home, just like playing on a Word document, just here's George. I'm just like, and meanwhile, like society's like collapsing outside my door. It's just become The Walking Dead with everyone, fighting over cans of food. Me just going, ooh, delicious lemon and ginger tea. I'm having a fabulous time. It's just like people have turned to cannibalism out in the streets. Like, just ridiculous. It's so crazy.
Sweet ignorance. What's CrowdStrike? I'm interested to see what their share price is doing at the moment.
Not good, I imagine. Badly. Could you imagine that, Paul? This is why you don't play in prod.
That's the thing, right? Whenever someone pushes an update for one of these large pieces, and look, generally speaking,
it's fine. Generally, it's fine.
But also, people will test things. There'll be
sure, and people make mistakes, and they put a patch out, and it's like not a big deal. Like mistakes happen, but like,
they're down. It's only this is as of Friday, so there hasn't been a heap of time for their shares.
It'd be all after hours trading, I think. Yeah,
but like it's down 17.92%.
Yes, that's a lot.
They were already on the decline because of some other announcements they made like a week and a half ago or a month ago or something. But you
got to remember, this is like a multi-billion-dollar company. So for them
they're valued at $304 a share
from a high of at the start of July of $392 a share to go down to $304 a share. I mean, that's a 25% decline over the course of a month. Like we're talking about billions and billions of dollars wiped out in shareholder value there. Like that's actually crazy.
Yeah.
The revenue of this company is $2.24 billion USD per year. That's its revenue, which means that the market capitalization of this company, okay, here it is. $74 billion is the market capitalization of this company. So we're talking about maybe $10, $20 billion of value that's been wiped out in the last.
And they're going to get sued into oblivion.
Oh,
like
100%.
imagine like, there was an example yesterday. Where
this definitely breaches our service level agreements. The SLAs have been absolutely breached. They haven't just been breached. They've been run through by a fucking freight train.
Can you imagine the lawyers at CrowdStrike at the moment going, can we just check the contract?
Can we just pull up the contract real quick? I don't think it's looking too good.
Can we just look at the clause?
Hey, so it's just your client success representative, just checking in, seeing how you're doing. We know your renewal's coming up in a couple months, so we just wanted to have a bit of a chat, sort of see where you guys, I'll go fuck myself. Okay, great. Cool. Well, it's been a great chat. Let's touch base again. We'll circle back in a couple of weeks and see how you guys are doing. I mean, look, it's just so good to catch up. Are you still there?
Oh, you're gone.
He's hung up.
But yeah, like there was an example yesterday. A friend told me he works at a hospital.
Nothing critical about that. Hospital infrastructure.
Claim of a patient didn't go through because of whatever,
people lined up at petrol stations and like couldn't pay for their petrol. Like it was just crazy, like actual craziness. I think if you tried to orchestrate a cyber incident, like you could not have.
The Russians are looking at this going,
interesting. Vasily, take some notes.
Meanwhile, Elon Musk on Twitter's like, yeah, bro, we just uninstalled it on every single computer at Twitter. Meanwhile, I'm sure every threat actor in the fucking world is looking
trying
to look for computers that once did have CrowdStrike on it that are probably fucking like
what are the 0-day exploits that we can now do to these computers that have just been rolled out?
Yeah, exactly. Like what can we hack?
Oh God, I honestly cannot stand. Like as much as I cannot stand Elon Musk normally, he's really giving me the irrits this week. Apparently, he's donating $45 million a month to the Trump campaign. I was just like, I can't just stop being you, Elon. All you needed to do was keep doing Tesla and shoot rockets into the air, and you would have been the GOAT. And you had to open your mouth. You had to get your fucking Twitter on. You had to, didn't you, mate? You had to ruin it.
Ruined it for everyone. Speaking of ruining it for everyone, we're going to go over to Australia now. And documents that have been obtained under freedom of information laws have shown that some pathology companies have been... Look, I don't want to say rorting the system, but rorting the system is
you don't have to say it. There's a quote from, who was it? Health economist, Professor Stephen Duckett. His quote is, quote, systematic rorting on a very large scale. So you don't have to say that, Adam. Stephen Duckett has said it.
Great. George, what has happened here? Why are people rorting Medicare?
So, essentially what happened, so this dates back to the early days of the pandemic, where a bunch of pathology companies were enlisted by the government to conduct large-scale testing initiatives for the coronavirus. And you may recall this took the form of like drive-through testing, testing at, GP clinics, testing at like walk-up clinics.
The drive-through testing was a vibe. That was definitely a vibe. That was like you're feeling crook as fuck in your car.
Yeah.
And you're like, I need to get a fucking test to exist. And it's just like sitting in your car going,
It was one of those things that looking back on it, you realize you're going to be like telling your kids about this one day, where it's like, this was like when people say like, what was it like to live through the pandemic, Daddy? So first of all, I don't know why my child is a Dickensian child from London in the 1800s. Hello, Daddy.
Hello, Governor.
Hello, Gov. Shoe shine for a sixpence.
If Leo ever comes up, if he ever does that accent or like just evolves that accent, I'll be chef's kiss.
But like it was one of those things that you're going to look back on and you go, that was wild. We're sitting there. It's like something out of like Contagion, the movie, where we're sitting in car park lines, trying to get a drive-through test. With the plastic everywhere and people in lines and the vials and things, little testers getting stuck in your nose and everything. Like looking back on it now, it was a pretty insane time that we all lived through. But essentially, these a bunch of different pathology companies were enlisted by the federal and state governments to conduct these tests. Now, there was at the time some complexity and public disagreement as to who was compensating whom for the tests. So some of these, state and federal government is like that meme of the Spider-Man pointing at each other where it's you pay for it. No, you pay for it. And so these pathology companies have claimed that because there was not sufficient clarity as to like who was paying for what and under what circumstances, that they basically just charged everything off to Medicare. So it was meant to be that the state was reimbursing them for some of the expenses, and then the federal government was going to reimburse them for the other half, right?
Right.
And what they've just done is they said, we'll take that state money, thank you very much, and we're just going to charge the full amount to Medicare. So essentially double dipping on all these different tests. And there was some disagreement about whether a test without a GP was required. There were GPs that were allegedly there was one instance of a GP putting through 21,000 requests for tests in a day, which definitely should have raised some alarms. Because insane. The requirement at the time was that you needed to individually consult with each one of these people before sending them off to a test. So it's like the idea that someone consulted with 21,000 people and like GPs are fast. They will get you in and out of there real quick, especially if they're bulk billing, but no GP is 21,000 people in a day fast. So a bunch of tests that were going through that were being compensated for from the incorrect source and also not being really put through under the right circumstances. There was also instances of particular pathology companies testing for things which were not required as part of it. So you would go through a drive-through test, and the only way that you could tell it was different from the other drive-through tests is when you would get a text message a day or two later saying you have tested negative for COVID-19, as well as influenza A, B, RSV, XYZ.
Which means they can claim
all of these different tests through Medicare and charge them off to the federal government, even though those tests weren't like medically necessary or required. So it also puts additional strain on the pathology testing system, which would have been under pretty heavy strain during those years when, we were pushing through millions of COVID tests every year. So
how much money are we talking about in this instance? Like what's the...
So a lot. So there, so in total over the period that this article is examining, it was roughly 27.7 million tests, and roughly $2.3 billion worth of benefits were paid out as a result.
And that includes legitimate tests as well.
All tests we're talking about.
That's all tests. But of that 2.3...
With that said, if you've got a 1% rate of illegitimate testing, you're talking about $23 million there. So, and given the reporting that's coming out as a result of these freedom of information requests that the ABC and others have done, we're talking about a much higher failure rate than 1%. So we're talking about potentially tens of millions of dollars worth of taxpayer money that was spent illegitimately. That's gone straight into the pockets of these pathology testers. So
it's the same sort of issue that we were talking about with the NDIS in some ways, is that if the system isn't quite robust enough to have checks and balances to examine against it, people can just put through whatever fucking claims they want and get paid for it.
It's interesting that you bring that up again, because we did have a listener of the show write into us about that, saying that, the NDIS actually does have an app. And if you're not a person with an ABN, if you're just an individual trying to seek reimbursement for a lot of these claims, it's actually really difficult. And so the idea that Bill Shorten and the government was espousing, the idea that anyone can just put in claims and they're going to get money back, it sounded specious to me at the time that those claims are being, sort of propounded. And looking back,
I think the issue is that if you do have an ABN, you can claim whatever you want without really any sort of description as to what. Again,
it's not that you can claim whatever you want; it's that it's easier to claim than an individual without that. So, I'm just pulling up the friend of the show, Kat, says there is absolutely an app for NDIS, and you have to have the correct line item or they reject the invoice. There is an app for NDIS and one for My Plan Manager. The description also has to be correct. It's often difficult to get invoices approved. Meanwhile, anyone with an ABN can say they are a support coordinator and can claim a ridiculous hourly rate. So it's not that what they're claiming is incorrect.
That's what Bill Shorten's calling out. Yeah.
But it's not that what they're claiming is incorrect. It's that they're claiming a singular item and they're just saying and my rate is $5 million dues an hour. Right.
Okay.
Providers are charging above the NDIS rate and are often not providing quality services, e.g., an OT can charge you $484 after you fill in an online form that they use to auto-generate a report. So $484 for doing fuck all, really. The system is padding the pockets of middlemen while the clients are getting very little and a lot of funding is getting rejected. So, it's... So thank you, Kat, for writing that in. I'm sorry it's taken me so long to get back to that comment, because that was about a month ago. But, it's that... There is money that is being approved. It's just not necessarily going to the people who actually should be
the right one. Right. Yeah, which I think is vaguely what Bill Shorten was calling out. We probably didn't do a deep enough dive on it.
But the story was people are charging off, wristies to the NDIS and getting blowjobs on the company.
It was what was the terminology? Shonky providers or whatever the terminology was. Shonky or jonky, I don't know. Same issue here, and to some extent, where it's just people taking the piss out of the system. Right?
I remember saying at the time when we were announcing all of these big funding packages and big spending, stimulus and all this, big job seeker and all these sorts of big programs. I remember saying on the podcast at the time, we will be uncovering the shonky things that people are doing for years to come. The amount of rorting that's going to happen with all of this money flooding into the system.
Good that they spent the money because it stopped people dying and going, a whole economy collapsing. But it was rushed out. And when you rush things...
This is what you see. It's evidence of people really rushing stuff out, conflict between state and federal governments, people just trying to get stuff out the door and not planning for cynical capitalist opportunists to come in and try and soak up as much money as possible, and make hay while the sun is shining. So,
and personally, I've the COVID disaster stuff, as an example, people have claimed those in my name through it. I've been a victim of identity fraud.
The COVID disaster payments.
Yeah, all they had to do was just sort of vaguely prove that they were me, and then Centrelink was like, "Yeah, sweet, here's $1,500."
Yeah.
but whatever it was, $1,000. Can't remember how much it was. But
which makes me
then
think
I've got to go back
have
and clear my name, even though I was the one. Anyway.
Yeah, this is because you had elements of your identity stolen, and so they were making claims on your stuff. Yeah, so we absolutely know it's happening, but as to it's one thing being scammed by like a criminal. It's another thing when large public companies who have a fiduciary responsibility and have an obligation to act within the law are also rorting the government at a large scale. Like, you know what I mean? It is slightly different that, Vasily from the dark web ripped off your details versus like Sonic Healthcare, which cleared, $1.3 billion in public money in 2020 and 2021, like they have a responsibility to not act outside of the law, which it seems as though, that's the allegation that they've essentially acted criminally, large scale rorts. And that's not from me saying that. Lawyers. Okay. Again, that's from a professor in public health economics, right? That have said large scale systematic rorting from these pathology companies. And part of it, it is the government's fault to a certain degree because they didn't issue appropriate controls. So, I understand things had to get out the door fast, but if you issue large sums of money to private companies without controls, without some sort of regulation and oversight, like they're going to take advantage. That's human nature, is people will do that. So it's the responsibility of the government when spending our money, even in a crisis, to make sure that it's not being done in a way that's reckless.
Indeed. Speaking of reckless, our next story today has been the widespread coverage of the dodgy unions in Victoria. There's criminals. So look,
bloody unions, the bloody unions. Criminal unions, the bloody not good bloody unions.
And to be very clear, what we're talking about here, Channel 9 and Fairfax, that sort of organisation, released a damning report, sort of both on 60 Minutes and I think in some newspapers as well.
Who knew journalism was still happening at Channel 9?
Yeah, no,
I thought it was all just paid product placement. That's weird.
About a week and a half ago, they released basically a report that sort of went into detail about criminal behaviour within it is the Construction, Forestry, Maritime Employees Union, better known as the CFMEU, which is one of the biggest and most influential unions in Australia.
Yeah.
So what have they alleged? So they're alleging that basically, Channel 9 is basically alleging that the union has links to criminal bikie gangs, for instance. There are members of said bikie gangs appointed as union delegates. There are pay-for-play schemes occurring in terms of various levels of corruption within that organisation. And that basically that it's into their words that the organisation is effectively being compromised to enough of an extent that it's not really running as a proper union really should. Now, the details of
which is, by the way, isn't that the plot of like season 5 of The Sopranos, where there's some big build project going on and they're all just like sitting around collecting checks for doing nothing? Like, isn't that literally like something out of a TV show?
It's been interesting, actually. A lot of the reporting has been about the fallout of these allegations. There hasn't been a whole lot of reporting on the allegations themselves. But that's the broad brushstroke of it. If you want specifics, you can look at Google the 60 Minutes report.
We've got the article in the show notes as well.
Yeah. But either way, just after it aired, John Sector, who's the basically the what is he? He was the branch secretary of the CFMEU's Victorian Construction Division. He had been that for 12 years. He stepped down. And was no, we're all innocent. It's just It
wasn't after the allegations were put to air. It was after the allegations were put to him. Okay, so it wasn't even like the allegations have aired and like, oh no, he has to resign. He like pre-resigned. He pre-signed. He was like, the allegations have been put to me. They're going to air on Saturday. It's going to be real bad. I'm going to resign preemptively. Like, that's bad.
It's not great. The video on my end, George, is just sort of desynced completely, but I can still hear you okay, I believe.
All good.
I think we're going to watch his little exit speech. Is that what's happening?
No, I wanted to show Tony Burke. So essentially what's happened is the fallout from these allegations are that there's basically the CFMEU is going to be put under independent administration. There's also been talk of it being like potentially deregistered as an organization, like disbanded, like a frat during one of those like frat party movies where it's like the dean says our fraternity can't be a fraternity anymore. It just doesn't exist. Like that's what's being talked about, which is pretty serious when you think about the fact that the Labor Party and a big part of its political base and background is rooted in unions and the union movement, particularly with regard to the CFMEU. So here's Tony Burke talking about that independent administrator being appointed.
Now, the number one job of any union is to look after its members. That's a job of the union and it's a job of the officials. The reported behaviour from the construction division of the CFMEU is the exact opposite of that obligation. It's abhorrent, it's intolerable. I said over the weekend that we would take action to address these issues, and we are. I said that I would weigh up three things. I would look at the evidence as it continued to appear. I said that I would look at whatever response there had been from the union, and I would look at the advice that I received from my department. The General Manager of the Fair Work Commission is the best person placed to take this action. The action does have a series of complexities under the Fair Work Act, a series of various conditions that the General Manager is currently taking advice on. So I want to make the following clear. Any action that the General Manager takes with respect to any division of any part of the construction division of the CFMEU, I, as Minister, will intervene in support of that action. I do believe these actions are best taken by the regulator, but any action to appoint an administrator will be supported by me as Minister.
So since then, that was I think the other day, Labor's had a bit of a think about it. They've had a think and they've announced a bunch of other actions. So basically, for context, the government, both the Victorian Labor government and the federal Labor government, have been very vocal and swift to basically, decry and to sort of call out the allegations. And we'll talk about why in a second. But since that time, basically, Labor has decided to stop. Both the state governments on a number of different levels, as well as the federal government, have decided to stop taking donations from the Victorian branch.
Yeah, because I think
construction division
they were sort of
CFMEU
pushed into that, though. It seemed like they didn't say anything about that initially, and then the opposition was like, "You're going to keep accepting money from them, or what's the story there, buddy?" They're like, like their money's still green, so we're not going to. It's like, there's a lot of criminals there. You should maybe think about not accepting the money from there. So, yeah, I'm glad to hear that they decided to do that.
They've also basically cut ties with... So, basically, there is a division of the Labor Party that has a union sort of rep or an element of the union embedded inside it, and they've basically cut ties with that.
Well, it's the party that it's the Labor movement, like that has grown out of the Labor movement, which is primarily based in unions. So, whilst, yes, I think that is an appropriate action, like clearly the Liberal Party is not asking for them to do that out of the goodness of their hearts, because they're not acting in good faith. They're saying that because they want to cut Labor off at the knees with regards to their power base, right? It is advantageous for the Liberal Party to tar Labor and the unions with the same criminal brush, right?
And that's the why, right? So for the last... I don't know, before Howard, this was a big thing with the docs crisis, 40, 30 years ago, whatever it was. The concept that Labor and the unions are working together and that it's not very transparent and that, there could be potential criminal.
It's the Reds under the bed. It is the absolute fever dream boogeyman that the Liberal Party has always been going on about with regards to Labor and the unions.
And they've kind of been right.
Yeah, in this instance, it seems like it. Yeah.
And to be very clear, we're not talking about the entire CFMEU. We're talking about the Victorian Construction Division, at least for the moment. Although I did see an article pop up today about South Australia. But so just to be clear, so everyone, they're cutting ties with the Victorian branch of the CFMEU's construction division. Now, why is, where are these unions, where do they have their power? Basically, it's big infrastructure projects or big buildings, right? You're not going to necessarily find union delegates on residential construction sites. They'll probably be on big high-rise apartments, Victoria's big build, which makes it also kind of fucking complicated because the amount of money the government's pumped into, the Victorian government has pumped into some of these infrastructure projects, right? I
think it's $100 billion or something like that. Yeah, $100 billion big build infrastructure plan. So we're talking about, putting... level crossings underground. So we're talking about new freeways and connecting up, linking different highways to each other and things like that. It's a massive program of work. And
so the union represents workers on those sites and is able to basically negotiate, rates on behalf of them, which actually works pretty well, and to be fair to John and to the CFMEU's work in general, over, the last 10, 12 years, they have increased working conditions and pay rates for these workers. But the question being is, at what cost?
Who else is benefiting?
Yeah. And also I guess I saw another article today, which is has any of this corruption led to cost increases in construction? And I guess the simple answer is to some extent.
It has to. Yes. It has to. If there's someone lining their pockets as a result of what's going on here in a criminal way, that is money that would otherwise be going to facilitate the construction of these projects. It sucks because I'm generally someone who genuinely believes in the power of unions to collectively bargain and, make life better for their employees, for the people whom they represent. I'm the direct beneficiary of my work at a university, the direct beneficiary of a union who is going to is in discussions with the university to craft an enterprise bargaining agreement, which looks after, not just rates of pay, but also other kinds of benefits. I do believe in the power of unions to make people's lives better. And it's unfortunate when I don't think it's necessarily true. I don't think being a union necessitates criminal things happening like the Liberal Party would have you believe, all labor unions are corrupt by their very nature. But it doesn't help to try and make the case to people when things like this do come out, when you do hear about criminal behavior happening in unions, when you hear about...
It's just going to reinforce, the narrative,
the stereotype. Yeah, exactly. It's really, really unfortunate because I think on the whole, unions have done a lot of good for people's lives and working conditions. And you see what happens when unions get broken down, for example, the teachers union in Wisconsin. There was a big thing in the previous election cycle was Governor Scott Walker, and basically the way he dismantled the education union in Wisconsin and the fallout over the last 5 years after he's done that has just been catastrophic for the education system. It's not good for the industry when, construction industry or teaching industry or whichever industry may be, if you've got unions in there that are engaging in good faith on behalf of their workers, it's actually not good for the industry as a whole if those unions are smashed.
You don't want to smash the union. I mean, the opposition's been calling for deregistration, and Tony Burke's threatened it. The Victorian government has announced an independent inquiry into the whole thing. So everyone's sort of every government's trying to wring their hands and sort of separate themselves, distance themselves from these allegations. I mean, look, John Setka, for instance, doesn't come out of it sort of lightly. That, you know, a lot of the corruption is sort of blamed at a lower level, but you know, there is a focus of the Channel 9 report on him as well in terms of like some of his sort of what you might describe as thuggish behavior in terms of pressuring people. You know,
there was
like the Sopranos, right?
Yeah.
Like where they're sort of trying to push people.
Hey, it's a nice building site. Be a shame if something happened to it. There was an incident where he like what was it? He like brought something.
Well, he was expelled from as a member from the Labor Party in 2019 because he made a bunch of remarks about domestic violence campaigner Rosie Batty, which Setka denied. But has since 2019 has retained the position. There's also a bunch of stuff during the pandemic, the lockdowns, where like there was a fucking riot in the center of Melbourne by like CFMEU like associated people, but John was like not allegedly the one that coordinated it. Like there was like some other movement. Like it was very weird. There was
this was there was an allegation made that John Setka made a menacing nighttime visit to the family of a fellow senior union official to dump a suitcase scrawled with a message attacking the official as a dog. As they've got him on CCTV dumping the suitcase out the front of this guy's place. Like, when you say thuggish behavior, it's like, that's obviously not on.
Right.
Like
very professional,
threatening people with,
it's probably definitely time that he sort of like left the organization. You can't sort of you can't make the organization look sort of professional if the guy, he's got like where's Southern Cross, paraphernalia. Although I guess that's in the actual, I think the maybe some of the imagery of the CFMEU as well. But anyway, he looks like a bit of a rough individual if you see him from the outside. So I don't know whether the appearance
regardless of whether someone looks rough or not, it's about the behavior, right? Like,
well, indeed, at the end of the day, it's just kind of like, I don't know. It's just sad that it sort of matches the behavior in this case. But look, at the main thrust of the Channel 9 stuff is more around the other stuff that's happening. But yeah, as I said, we'll link the 60 Minutes program in the show notes.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of thuggish behavior,
yes,
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump. So, okay, so where to start? So we've got the classified documents case, and then we'll go into the RNC convention. So this week, Donald Trump's classified documents case was dismissed. So Judge Eileen Cannon, who was a Trump appointee, did Trump the favor of dismissing the criminal case against him by saying that the special counsel Jack Smith, who was leading the prosecution, was unlawfully appointed to his role and thus did not have the authority to bring the case. If you're wondering, is this a thing that happens? The answer is no. This is not a thing that happens. This is a thing that Judge Eileen Cannon has made up with her mind. So this is a very, very common practice, is to appoint special prosecutors when there are areas of political sensitivity that need to be looked into, such as the case with Hunter Biden. So like if they're saying like, I would, such as the case with Ken Starr, who did the report into Monica Lewinsky and the Clinton White House and all that sort of stuff. Like
everyone's used special prosecutors.
This is a common thing that has been part of, the day-to-day operation of the law in the United States for decades. And basically what happened is in that immunity case, which Clarence Thomas and the rest of the Supreme Court ruled on in July, which said that the president is, when the president does it, it's not a crime. He actually outlined the idea, the theory that because this was the case, it may have effect on, because Trump was immune with regard to this case, it may have effect on other cases. And actually, he basically provided the playbook for Eileen Cannon to draw from as precedent. like even specifically mentioning the classified documents case as an example. So basically what's happened is everyone's read that as basically a smoke signal from Clarence Thomas in his concurrence to say, hey, Eileen Cannon, did you think about this? And basically she said, no, I didn't think about that. Thanks, Clarence. I will dismiss the case. So a case that is an open and shut, like of all the criminal cases.
Did you take the documents? Yes.
Yes. And here is a photo of them in your house. Here is CCTV footage
next to the toilet
of your guys running them around the place, trying to hide them from the FBI. Like it is the clearest cut version of an obvious crime that has ever, like I've never seen a public figure that's been so credibly accused of a crime that they actually did than this case. Like it is just a classic example of he absolutely did the thing and we're just not going to hold him. We've decided that we have no credibility as an institution and we're not going to hold him accountable because why? Because fuck you. That's why. Like
I think it's probably the most significant use of quote unquote a technicality in the law.
But it's not even like a technicality. It is Eileen Cannon has just decided she is going to be a partisan shill for the guy. Like, this is how countries slide into autocracy. It's very rarely is it like Hitler with the rise to power and then like, psych, we're going to be fascist. And, like we've taken, the stormtroopers marching in the streets, like people, it's not generally like that, right? In terms of when democracies backslide, what happens is it happens by degrees. It happens by, the undermining of institutions, of the media, of the courts, of, various, prominent institutions. It comes by, undermining the credibility, restricting the freedom of speech. It comes from judges making obviously partisan, choices that then the people who are looking on can see, oh, this is like obviously partisan bullshit, but there's nothing we can do about it. And this is just the law of the land. So I am forced to accept this obviously fake bad ruling because that's just might makes right. And that's how it happens. It happens by slices. It doesn't ever happen all at once. And so for this woman to make this ruling, it's like, it's not just like unjust. It's actually criminal. It's actually like betraying democracy.
The US Justice Department announced it will appeal against the ruling.
Yeah, but fucking too little, too late. Like he's already going to be elected by the time this rolls around. Like she's been slow walking this case ever since the start. This whole idea of whether presidential immunity was even going to be a factor. This was all entertained by her, by Eileen Cannon. That's why it got kicked up to the Supreme Court in the first place. It's all because of her. We've got Chief Queef 88 writing in. Fantastic username.
As a name. Great.
I love that. Just fantastic. No notes. Saying nobody is above the law. What is your opinion of America from the outside looking in? I am in the US, but I feel like we are a joke to people watching. Well, Chief Queef, yes.
It's not looking great.
It's not looking great. Yeah, it does. Really, the country is starting to look like a joke. When you can't take the institutions of power, it's one of the three branches of government, the Supreme
Checks
Court.
and balances, right?
It undermines the whole idea, exactly right, of checks and balances. The whole idea is that the Supreme Court is meant to be an institution that is above reproach. Okay, that acts in accordance with the Constitution for the benefit of the country, against the political, the vagaries and the whims of the political moment. It's meant to be the rock that undergirds everything, because politicians change. The executive, the president changes. It's meant to be that's why they have lifetime appointments, is because they're meant to be not swayed by the vagaries of day-to-day politics. That's what the founders were worried about.
For instance, and people like, hanging out with various members.
Just chilling out with billionaires, getting free, tens of thousands of dollars worth of free flights and hospitality. It's not a gift because it's just my billionaire mate flying me out. Yeah. It's not a gift. It's my billionaire mate paying 5 times for the sale of my house. That's for no reason. Yeah. Like, it's such obviously corrupt bullshit. I hate this so much.
yeah, look, to your question, what was the username again? Queef, what?
Chief Queef _88.
Chief Queef _88. Yeah, look, Australia's, we are quite cynical. We only get the headlines, right, of the US, which is like all the crazy shit that happens. We only really receive that. I'm sure there are much more normal conversations and things that happen that are very mundane and very, normal and official, and what's what I'm looking for, like that are when something's running as it should, George.
Sane.
What's the terminology for that? Sane, whatever.
Sure.
Sane. I'm sure that happens within the United States, within various states, right? I'm sure that happens. But what we see from the outside is, this fucking crazy thing just happened in the US. Lol, jokes.
Guns have human rights now. Like,
yeah. So, yeah, I mean, Trump, it's been pretty bad since sort of just before Trump got elected in sort of 2015, 2016. And it hasn't really stopped until then. And I think we were talking about this on the show, 3 weeks ago, George, where it's like the trust in the American world order is declining in part because of this insane.
I've never seen so much foot shooting by a country. Like the international order, America being the US dollar being the global reserve currency, is beneficial to the United States. I don't know if people are really the world order as it is currently constructed, these multilateral organizations the UN, the International
IMF.
Criminal Court and the IMF, they are constructed. This was designed during the Bretton Woods Agreement post World War II with a view to advancing America's interests in the world. Yes, we want a global order which ensures peace, but we want it on our terms. And we want to be the hub at the spoke, the hub at the center of the wheel through which all things go, not just because it's a benefit to the world, but also because it benefits us. We become the center of the universe. We become the world police. We become the central power without having to do a Roman-style occupation, across the world, which isn't sustainable. We still get to be the center of power without necessarily needing to occupy, like an empire, every country around the world. It is to Americans' benefit that the world is structured the way that it is, and yet...
And that America is stable as well.
Yes.
It is to it all depends. If America is stable, the world is kind of stable. If America decides to...
They're the richest country in the world, right? They've benefited immensely from the state of affairs, and yet they're like, oh, we just really want Trump to come in and throw some bombs and fuck it all up. It's but you guys are the ones that are benefiting the most from this. It's just so insane to me that they just keep doing this. It's just this country that just keeps punching itself in the head over and over. And you're like, why? Stop. Why are you doing this to yourself?
And this is a good way to transition to our next point, which is the running mate of Donald Trump. It's just been announced. Despite all that, despite the world order being centered around the US, there are still many people within various states, the Rust Belt and Midwest and everything else, that are not seeing the benefit from all that, global hegemony.
Sure.
And that is probably why they picked JD Vance as the running mate for Donald Trump, vice president-elect almost at this point for the next election. So who is JD Vance? JD Vance is a US senator and a hypocrite, shall we say. He wrote, he came to sort of prominence, I guess, because he wrote an autobiography called Hillbilly Elegy, which is turned into a film, by the way, which stars Amy Adams. Didn't know that. And since then, he's
I really love Amy Adams. That's so annoying.
I know.
Oh, no.
Apparently, it looks like a good film. I'm not going to lie. I have to look at the film. Maybe I have to read the book as well. But anyway, so he wrote that, got a bit of fame out of that. He's also a senator, and basically has, I guess, the roots, if you will, that resonate with the Trump base. Okay, people going, why did they appointed him? He doesn't appeal to the black vote. He doesn't appeal to the migrant vote. It was it's not about that. It's just about getting the base to come out and vote, right? But George, he hasn't always been a fan of Donald Trump, has he?
No. Now, there's so the Daily Show posted this tweet which says, inspirational. This Ohio man overcame the debilitating burden of his own principles. And it's just a screenshot of all of the various things that he said over the years about Donald Trump, and none of them are good. So, quote, might be America's Hitler, unquote. Might be a cynical a-hole, unquote. Cultural heroine, noxious and reprehensible. And also, I'm never a Trump guy, never liked him. These are separate quotes from different people that he's talking to. Terrible candidate, and you're a, quote, idiot if you voted for him, unquote. And now this is the guy who is going to be Donald Trump's vice president. So, he started in this like very, kind of like hillbilly atmosphere. But the guy then went on to like Yale Law School and then worked in big tech, followed Peter Thiel around for a lot of different things. So Peter Thiel, right-wing tech billionaire, who, something I noticed actually, which it was Peter Thiel was a real common thread through the Republican National Convention, which happened this last week. Peter Thiel got up and spoke. Peter Thiel, obviously, sort of gave JD Vance his start. Now JD Vance has been nominated, is going to be running on the ticket with Donald Trump. And Hulk Hogan was also speaking at the RNC, which with one of the most unhinged political speeches I've ever seen. We'll play a little bit in a sec.
I don't know what that was, but anyway.
But Peter Thiel was the one who, if you remember, provided Hulk Hogan the money to sue Gawker, which ended up being the downfall of that media organization. That was all orchestrated by Peter Thiel. So it really seems like he is a very much a strong driving force behind
a mover and shaker, shall we say, with
regard to
movement.
This incoming Trump administration. He's kind of like a big play in that regard,
and especially between him and
Elon Musk
has picked JD Vance. I think the Republican Party has picked JD Vance.
I disagree with that, because what it shows me is that Trump is feeling really supremely confident about where this is going. So there were 3 candidates that would have been shortlisted by the end of the process, according to reports. So there was Marco Rubio, who we know, so sort of Cuban-American from Florida, which is technically not constitutional. So apparently they were in discussions for him to move to New Hampshire or something like that, for basically change where he lived in order for it to be not unconstitutional for him to be appointed as Trump's VP, because he's also from Florida.
Why can't you be VP from Florida?
It's part of from
the same state.
You can't have 2 from the same state. I guess it's something to do with, it's in the Constitution. It's part of their, I guess, making sure the different interests are represented. I don't know.
Yeah.
So there was that. There was Doug Burgum, who was kind of a, who Trump seemed to like, very conservative sort of guy, not very charismatic. But they seem to get along. And the third option was JD Vance. Now, of the 3 options, JD Vance has the most extreme, for what you would describe as hyper MAGA type views, at least now that he's espoused. He didn't when he started in Congress, whatever it was, a year and a half ago. But now he does. And
apparently, is he a bit gun crazy as well? Loves
his guns. No, that's just de rigueur for any Republican candidate nowadays.
That's not even at the end of the day, that's not the worst thing, right? The worst,
probably the worst thing about him is his extreme anti-abortion stance, in which he says that there should be a complete ban on abortions altogether, without even exemptions for incest or the life of the mother. So he is saying that if a young girl gets raped by her own dad, that she should be forced to carry that child to term. It's one of the most insane, 2% issue. I don't understand how any major politician could be for such an aggressive stance. It makes no sense whatsoever. And so essentially what I think Trump is doing here with this choice is that he could have picked Marco Rubio, which would have helped him electorally, right? Because Rubio as a Cuban, maybe would create further inroads with the Latino community, help him solidify areas that he wants to win. JD Vance doesn't help him electorally. So he's
not from let's swing the vote or let's get people from different demographics, but if you want to just get more people of the same demographic,
it's energizing the base
to vote. Yeah, it ticks all those boxes, and he's young as well.
But that's what I mean. It's not about, it's for the JD Vance pick is not a persuasion. We're not trying to persuade people. We're trying to turn out the base. And so from that, in that respect, it shows that he's pretty confident. He knows he's going to win the election if things keep proceeding at the current trajectory. He knows he's going to win. And what he wants is a guy who is just ardent, 100% mega MAGA, who is going to be his legacy in terms of carrying these principles through to the next generation. If you went with an establishment figure like Marco Rubio, who's conservative, but he's also very tied into the old guard Republican establishment, you go, maybe he's trying to appeal more to, sort of moderates and trying to get some of the like establishment Republicans on board, trying to win over that side of the party. He's basically said, fuck that side of the party. This is now my party. And if you don't get me, you're going to get mini me over here. What it shows to me is extreme confidence that he's going to win the next election and a kind of like throwing of the javelin into the future of his brand of kind of bomb throwing politics. I'm assuming
JD Vance doesn't change his mind again in the next like 4 or 5 years or something.
I actually don't know how much of a cynical actor he is, if he really is just like one of those people that is just purely about avarice and following his political ambitions to the exclusion of everything else, or if he's genuinely I really do think he's been
epiphany kind of thing.
Not an epiphany. I would describe it as like being radicalized over the last 5 years, where it's like, he was a kind of
a few conferences,
liberal intelligentsia guy, but I really do think that being involved in Republican politics for the last couple of years has rotted his brain. I genuinely do think he would say and do anything for Trump at this point. He's the very definition of a loyalist, right? He would do anything for him.
Yeah. Over the last, it's not just him. Everyone has been where they were criticizing Trump like a year ago. A lot of people have been, like major world politicians have been like turning around, presidents of companies have been turning around going, oh yeah, no, Donald Trump, you're right. Yeah. Like Kevin Rudd, who's currently the Australian ambassador, who's a former prime minister here in Australia, evidently criticized Donald Trump, said a lot of mean things about him. And since the assassination has been like, oh yeah, no, we'll be ready to work with him and feeling really sorry for him and yada, 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 yada. I mean, this is all just so Kevin Rudd can save his ambassadorship, which I don't know if he will. I think he'll get replaced with Scott Morrison, to be honest. But it's not just JD Vance. Like everyone has sort of who can see the writing on the wall and have flipped and changed their tune to suit the political narrative, I guess, and suit their own interests. The convention in general was pretty fucking wild, I would say.
It was nuts.
Obviously, like there's, Trump came out and sort of appeared. He didn't actually speak at first. He just sort of appeared with a bandage over his ear. Next minute, everyone's wearing bandages on their ears as like signs of support.
So crazy. It does feel like a cult. Like people wearing fake bandages on their ears as a show of like symbolic support to their Lord and Savior. So much like religious iconography.
It is, yeah.
And like I think it was Laura Trump tweeted a photo of like, after the assassination attempt, like Jesus with his hand on like Trump's shoulder, being like, looking after you, mate. Like, and he's really he's
lent into that.
He's absolutely leaned into it this time round, which he has not done before. We all know he's not a religious man. What with his favorite passage of the Bible being 2 Corinthians. So he's obviously not a religious man, but like he's really leaning into it after this assassination attempt. And the rhetoric has been around of him being this godlike figure. God was protecting him. God has saved him for this. Like it really plays to that evangelical psychosis in America of this religious figure, this Messiah. It's kind of kicked it into a whole nother level of cult-like status for him. It's very concerning. I don't know if I've said that enough. It's incredibly concerning. But like with regard to it reminds me of, I reread George Orwell's 1984 recently. I don't know why. I don't know what about the current political moment made me think that was a good idea to reread that again. There's the whole idea of like JD Vance being able to completely turn on all of his principles. It reminded me of a passage which I found here. It talks about the ultimate betrayal the ultimate betrayal, it's towards the end of the book, where you don't just accept Big Brother, you love him by the end. So so this is a quote from Goldstein. Goldstein's the guy who's betrayed Winston, the main character, and sort of turned him over to the police and is interrogating him. He says, quote, "You hate him. Good. Then the time has come for you to take the last step. You must love Big Brother. It is not enough to obey him. You must love him." That's what it feels like. This moment is so charged and political that it's like, it's not enough for you to vote for Trump. You need to love him. You need to like swear obeisance to the new God emperor. Like that is the level of like,
I mean, there are similarities to early Christianity in that regard. Like, you know, I was saying to my partner before, it's like, she's like, why are people putting bandages over their ears? I'm like, well, it's a sign of support, and people want to support.
They see him as a messianic figure.
Yeah, they support through symbols. And in this case here, this, you know, in Jesus' case, it was let's get a crucifix, and because all the Christians were getting burnt in early Christendom, crucifixes became the symbol of the Christian church. In this case here, it's the equivalent of the crucifix. The early days of Trump are a bandage over the ear.
It's so batshit.
But it's, you know, it's the same sort of, I guess, early inclination. Obviously, in the Christian example, it's turned into much more of that. But it's just it's funny how these things start. Anyway, I think it's probably so. There was that aspect. There was the religious aspect. There was the weird shit that some of these people said in their speeches. But I think the ultimate, I want to say, the MVP moment of the whole convention has to go to Hulk Hogan. Like, that's going to be the most entertaining part. And we're going to just repeat this for you verbatim.
Well, he's leaned. Yeah, it's another thing that he's leaned into is like, and I think the idea is to contrast with Joe Biden. I think that's the idea with the messaging, is that Joe Biden's this old infirm guy who's probably going to get dumped by his party in the next week or so. And I'm this strong, younger, virile, strong man. You know, the speech that he gave, this 90-minute speech he wanted to, it was like the longest in convention history that he's given, this 90-minute rambling speech. And that's also meant to be like a demonstration of his vitality, right? That he can go and like command a room for an hour and a half. Like, he's also aligning himself with Dana White, who's like the head of the UFC, and with Hulk Hogan here. I think it's like, 14-year-old me would have been like very impressed with this cool manly man hanging out with all these, you know, wrestlers. You know what I mean? Like, he's got that 14-year-old in 1996 demographic fucking locked up. But that seems to be what he's appealing to with all of these, you know, people he's surrounding himself with, and, you know, going to the UFC and like all this sort of shit. So anyway, so one of the speeches was Hulk Hogan saying a bunch of unhinged, crazy shit. So let's hear that.
But what happened last week when they took a shot at my hero?
I think he's jacking off.
And they tried to kill the next president of the United States. Enough was enough. And I said, let Trumpomania run wild, brother.
So what they're cheering at there is he's ripped the shirt, which had some muscle-bound American man with a flag on it, is ripped through that, and there's a Trump Vance t-shirt or singlet underneath that he's exposing by ripping it up. So that's manly.
Let Trumpomania rule again. Let Trumpomania make America great again. They've thrown everything at Donald Trump. All the investigations, the impeachments, the court cases, and he's still standing and kicking their butts. What you gonna do when Donald Trump and all the Trumpomaniacs run wild on you, brother? God bless you.
Yeah, so...
Insane. Like, yeah, let's just incite more political violence after political violence was incited upon the guy that you're just talking about.
I don't know that if you're trying to explain to middle America how sensible and sensical and how much your candidate has turned over a new leaf and he's now like a calmer, serene version of himself. I don't know how describing them as Trumpomaniacs with Hulk Hogan as the messenger screaming it from the podium is necessarily going to communicate that message effectively to middle America, but it's a choice. It is a strong choice.
It was, like, you know, that's what Hulk Hogan used to do, right? That's the wrestling like vibe that he gives, a performance, if you will.
Sure.
And he delivered, but
it was certainly a performance.
Yeah, it was insane. Anyway, so I think that was probably the most interesting part of the conference was watching Hulk Hogan rip his shirt off. I was like, okay.
Mad, insane, crazy behavior. It's so wild to think he's going to be the next president again. Like, I honestly cannot believe it. Like,
I mean, maybe Biden does get dumped and Kamala Harris, like, gets to be the presidential nominee.
Yeah.
But like, even then, they've lost so much momentum now.
Yes.
Like,
yeah, and not just that, but like donor money. It's not just the fact that they've lost all this time and momentum. It's also like the support like it is now, it seems like to me, and a lot of commentators have said this week, it seems like we are passing the point where it is possible for Biden to mount, if he does continue to choose not to resign as the candidate, the point of them being able to mount an effective campaign is kind of past now with all of these Democrats that are coming out publicly against him. The Democrats in down ballot races that have come out against him, that are polling higher than he is nationally, and who's putting their Democratic races at risk. Like, they'll be running away from him. If he comes to town to shore up swing states for himself, he's not going to be running with the Democrats who are in those states. Like, they'll want to be completely like a mile away from him because they don't want to associate themselves with him. So it's like the ability for him to actually run a race now is so sufficiently degraded that I don't think it's winnable at all for him at this stage. So he needs to resign if they want to have any chance.
But my point is that even if you get another candidate, it's
even if you get Kamala Harris, it's not a guarantee of victory by any means. Like, she's polling better than Biden, but Biden is basically Weekend at Bernie's is a ham sandwich at this stage. Like, he may as well be a vegetable.
But like, they would have to reinvent the entire campaign message, and like, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that would have to, and that they need the time to be able to get that into people's heads.
Well, not just that, but also there is an advantage from the perspective of like the Trump media apparatus have basically been coming out this week being like, you don't want to replace Biden. Like, he's great. You should keep, the Trump campaign apparatus wants Biden to stay in. And so they're saying, we're going to launch all these legal challenges if you dump Biden off the ticket, like all this sort of stuff, basically saying that, you should keep him on because they want to run against Trump. They've designed their campaign infrastructure, the memes, the videos, the kind of like content mill strategy that they've put together has been to run against Biden. I think they're getting pretty worried now that Biden performed so terribly at the debate.
What if he drops out?
What if he drops out? And then we need to also redesign our entire campaign strategy, because a lot of the arguments that we were going to use against Biden are not going to work against Kamala Harris. Yes, you can say, you can talk about the crime, right? Because she's a prosecutor. You can talk about the southern border. Like, those are attacks that'll still stick to her. She was part of the administration, so you can kind of tar her with some of the same brushes. But the main line of argument against Biden, which was the most effective line, was that he was old and infirm and unable to do the job. Well, that line of argument doesn't work with Kamala. It just doesn't, because she's like, now the old candidate is Trump, who's 77, going on 78, and she's in her late 50s, 59 or something. So yeah, the it kind of like 6 of one, half a dozen of the other as to like how much it benefits. But either way, Kamala would still be the better choice, right? At least you have a chance. Yeah. You have a chance with Kamala. You have no chance with Joe. Yeah. Biden's currently running. I think Nate Silver put him at a 29% chance to win, which honestly seems high to me. So, I think. Just like any random Democrat would be better at this stage, but still doesn't mean that they actually still doesn't mean that they're guaranteed a victory by any means. It's still going to be very tight. and they'll have to fight.
The momentum is completely gone. They have to redo everything.
Maybe Trump is blessed because he has had the best run of fucking luck I've ever seen in politics ever. That being declared immune, the assassination attempt makes him look, so good. The run with, all of these court cases being adjudicated in his favor. Like, this is the single best run of political luck I've ever seen. People were saying after the assassination attempt, like, today was the day he won the presidency. Like, that's how much, it's kind of solidified in the minds of voters that he is this, vital, full of life figure, covered in blood, shot, and he sticks his arm in the air and says, fight, fight, fight. Contrast that with Joe Biden, who's just staring mouth agape into the middle distance. It's no contest as it currently stands. You have a chance if you dump him and go with Kamala, but the window is small and it's getting smaller, right?
Yeah. It's not good.
It's bad.
Speaking of bad, we've been Unnatural Selection.
We are, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on all the bullshit social medias that have, do, or ever will exist at our handle at Unnatural Show. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and mother flipping TikTok. Make sure you follow me on Instagram and Twitter at George Tsipos.
And you can follow me down to the CFMEU, where I'll be apologizing to John Setka for making remarks about him, which may or may not be true.
And the method that you'll be apologizing to him via will be having a shirt and having another shirt with a message that says "I'm sorry" underneath it, and then ripping your shirt open a la Hulk Hogan.
I don't know if I have the strength to rip open a shirt. I'm not going to lie, I go to the gym, so I don't think I could do that, even if I wanted to.
It seemed like a pretty sheer kind of material. In all fairness, it didn't seem like a proper t-shirt. It was a rippable t-shirt. It was like a stripper, like breakaway pants or something. You know what I mean? Like, okay. It was set up for that.
I mean, Hulk Hogan's 80, but he's like well bigger than me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
well,
I could bench press me.
Decades of steroid use will do that to you. So, and it may explain the atrophying of his frontal lobe and hence his willingness to speak for Donald Trump. Thanks for listening, guys. We love your faces, and we'll see you next week, providing society hasn't collapsed.